Hey guys, so I wanted to put this video together just to give you an idea of some different techniques on how to ink. Now I realize, especially for the art majors, this is kind of a silly video. It might be fairly redundant. However, I know there's a lot of you out there that inking is new to you, or that it's something that you haven't done in a while. And I just wanted to recap some of the basic ideas that you need to be aware of and that you need to make sure that you utilize when inking. Okay, so first and foremost, inking is very different than shading with a pencil. Obviously, the main reason being, one, you can't smudge it, and two, you cannot change the value unless, obviously, you've bought the gray markers and you can have different marker colors. If I'm assuming here we're using the microns or Sharpies or something like that, and if you have those, you only have the color black. So how do we show light, which is vital to showing that something is 3D, giving the illusion of depth, right? Well, the only way to create a value from light to dark would be to put your lines, as you can see I'm doing here in the corner, closer together. And the closer together they are, the darker the lines seem to be, because frankly there's more ink there. And then the further apart they are, the lighter the area seems to be, to the point where either you have no lines at all, and it's absolute the brightest light, or you have solid black, which is the ultimate lines together. Now, you don't have to just do this with hatching, which is the lines next to each other, or cross hatching, or where they crisscross, but you can also do it with dots, right? This is called stippling. I would recommend taking it easy on this though, because it does take a toll on your wrist. Try and maybe utilize your elbow as much as possible. But stippling is also great, and it might be something that you want to vary. In the video that I'm going to show you how to create the character here coming up in this week, I utilize both stippling and cross hatching and hatching. So it's something that you can use a little bit of everything depending on what texture you are drawing. Now, if you have a brush that you're dipping in a bottle of ink, which you can do, or you have the Prismacolor markers or the Copic markers, keep in mind that you can get very thick lines like I'm doing here with the brush pen, okay? And that's something that's very important, because when you want to show light, you want to vary your line weight, which is the thickness and thinness of your line. Okay, so basically, to put this into action, I have here a sphere, okay? And this arrow is exactly how the light, or the direction that the light is coming. So as the arrow comes and it hits the top of the sphere, it travels around the sphere. That's what those other arrows are. So as the light comes from the top, it hits the top of the sphere. That's going to be your lightest section, and then it travels around the sphere. It's actually going to hit the ground and reflect back, illuminating the bottom of the sphere. That's called reflected light. Most of you are familiar with this. So what I do is I take my brush here, my brush marker, or even a Sharpie, which would be totally fine, and I create a darker line on the bottom because it's the furthest away from the light. It's the darkest area. I create an oval to show the shadow, right? Because the shadow is going to be longer because the light is on an angle. If it was directly above, the shadow would become more of a circle, okay? And I'm going to fill this circle in with solid black because it's the darkest thing. The sphere is blocking out the light. Okay, the second darkest thing is going to be the core shadow, which is down the center of the sphere. Okay, as I work my way to the top, I switch to, this is the Copic version, but you can use the microns, it's the same concept, to a thinner pen, right? It's much thinner than the Sharpie, and I even leave some spaces up top where there is no line, and I'm implying that there's line because we understand that the sphere closes. However, there's no line there, which tells us subconsciously that there's a lot of light there, so much so that it's blowing the light out, right? As the light travels around, it obviously gets darker. So to show that here, I'm starting off with hatching, and as I build the hatching up and put more lines closer together, it's going to seem darker, right? The areas that I want extremely dark, I'm going to start cross hatching, okay? And the closer I get to the light source, the less lines I want, because I want it to seem lighter, okay? Now, as I said before, the light reflects off the floor, so I'm leaving a small, thin area of hatching that is darker than the area that's getting the light directly, but is also lighter than the core shadow, which is the center shadow, okay, around the sphere. And this is something that happens with anything that is round, for instance, even a cone or even my finger, which I think I even go to in this video in a second. So I'm cross-hatching as much as possible to darken that area. And as you can see, as I'm building it up, it's getting darker and darker and darker. And the more lines you put in, the more texture you have, right? So you want to be careful with that too. So if you don't want too much of a texture, don't put too many lines. I'm adding a little bit lines just to give like the idea that maybe the light is dissipating away from the sphere as that shadow moves away from the center. I don't think it's in the video, but if you wanted to too, you can also hit the center with your Sharpie, that core shadow, to darken it up even more if you feel that that's necessary. Again, I'm reiterating where the light is coming from. It's coming from the top, hitting the center, and moving around the sphere. Okay, as it hits the bottom, it reflects up and gives us that underlining, the reflected light. Okay. And here essentially is the final product. So this is exactly what I would like to be looking for with your cartoon. So if this was your arm or anything else, so for instance, here's my finger, right? So you see the light is coming from the top and it's illuminating the top, so much so that it looks like the top of my finger is pure white. And yet there's a center shadow that was dark, and then underneath it's slightly lighter than the center, creating that core shadow. So it's applicable to anything that is actually round. Okay, so again, make sure, I think the thing to take away from this is make sure you have a light source. The lines further away from the light source, the thicker they are, the darker they are. The things closer to the light source, the thinner lines that you use, and the less lines that you use. Okay, I hope that helps. I also posted some YouTube videos in regards to inking techniques. Check those out. It kind of elaborates on exactly what I've just told you. And if you have questions, make sure you email me. Thanks so much.